Hello and welcome to Peanutopia. In this video I want to continue working on the peanut fields to create a first 3D version of this environment. So let's start with modeling the landscape. For that I use the concept art as a reference and start with the spiral in the middle and on the left. Here I construct the fields and hills by keeping the overall shapes of the drawing. Then I also add some connecting parts like the road or the flat field at the bottom, and I also create a plane that represents the lake to be able to place the other hills at the right position according to the water level. Then I extrude the water and the hill edges downwards, and I also connect the spirals so that they form one coherent object. Finally, I close up the bottom, and that's the basic 3D version of the fields landscape. Now I also want to create one of the airplanes because they are an important asset for the field scene. So I start with the body shape and add some holes for the windows and the drop-shaped tank. Then I work on the winglet and keep on adjusting the overall shape. To create some thickness, I extrude the edges and form the inner shell of the plane. Afterwards I add the glass tanks and the windows, and I also create some seals between the windows and the body. Then I move on to the propeller, where I play around with different shapes, and I also add the wings, some small ones in the back and the big ones on the side. For the bigger wings I also create a round shape where another propeller is located. And one important feature is the watering system, so I add a pipe at the bottom of the wings with some mounts and little sprinklers. Lastly, the airplane should be able to land on the lake, so I add the floats at the bottom and connect them to the body. Next, let's bring everything together and create a few basic shaders. For the plane, I add the glass and oil shader from the car. Then for the rest of it, I experiment with different settings to create a color gradient with some grain. After adding a watercolor shader to the hills and a simple transparent shader to the water, I also scatter a few peanut plants on top of one field. And at this time it's enough just to get a first 3D impression of this whole setup. Of course, there's still a lot here that needs to be finished, but for now let's keep on moving forward with the story. That's why next time I'll show you the part that is following the desert scene, and we'll also take a first look at the architecture of Peanutopia. So hope to see you there, thanks and bye!